The night the rain wouldn't stop, a homeless boy named Eli stood barefoot on a porch facing 6 armed robbers, bleeding and trembling but refusing to run. Behind him, Kate, the wife of a notorious Hell's Angel, begged him to walk away. But Eli had already made his choice. After a lifetime of being forgotten, he finally found someone worth dying for. And when the thunder rolled moments later, it wasn't the sky that was about to explode. Welcome to Echo's Tales family. If this is your first time here, go ahead and subscribe, because the journey you're about to take will hit your heart in ways you don't see coming. To everyone who's been riding with this channel from day one, may God pour out blessing after blessing over your life. Before we step into this story, let's take a moment to pray. Heavenly Father, I lift up every person watching right now. Cover them with your protection. Watch over their families, heal their bodies, open doors where there seem to be none, and fill their hearts with a peace that can't be shaken. Let your presence rest on them today. In Jesus' mighty name, Amen. Now, this story you're about to hear is about a homeless boy who refuses to look away when it counts. He chooses the hardest path, the right one, and puts his own life on the line when the life of an innocent woman is at risk. The night the rain wouldn't stop, Eli stood barefoot on the splintered porch, facing 6 armed robbers with nothing but a rusted crowbar and a body that wouldn't stop shaking. Wind tore at his clothes, driving cold water into his skin like needles. Headlights from the 2 black SUVs carved harsh white lines across the yard, turning every raindrop into falling shards of glass. The men moved in a slow, confident line, guns hanging loose in their hands, like they were already sure how this night would end. Behind him, Kate's voice cracked through the storm. "Eli, please, get inside." She stood in the doorway of the little blue house, the warm yellow light behind her fighting against the darkness. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, mascara streaked with tears, tattoos slipping in and out of shadow with every flash of lightning. To Eli, she looked like everything soft and safe in a world that had never been either. He didn't turn around because if he saw her face again, he might break. And tonight, he couldn't afford to break. If this moment has your heart racing already, take a second to like this video, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, and drop a comment telling where you're watching from. It helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. Now, let's go back to that porch. The lead robber stepped forward, rain dripping from the brim of his cap, his boots sinking into the mud with heavy, slow steps. His eyes moved over Eli like he was looking at a problem, not a person. "Kid," he called out, voice smooth and cold under the thunder, "this doesn't concern you. Move aside. We're here for the woman." Lightning flashed, turning his face into a white mask for a second. Eli could see the narrow scar running from the corner of the man's mouth to his jaw, the kind of mark you didn't get from a clean life. The other 5 spread out into the yard, boots grinding gravel, guns angled lazily toward the porch. Not quite aiming. Not quite not. Eli's bare feet tried to slip on the wet boards, but he dug his toes into the wood and tightened his grip on the crowbar. His fingers were numb from the cold, but his chest burned hot. He didn't say anything yet. His throat felt too tight to trust his voice. He thought of 3 months ago, when his life had still been nothing but pavement and hunger. Back then, the storm had been inside him, not in the sky. He'd slept behind dumpsters with his arms wrapped around his stomach to quiet the cramps, listening to trucks hiss past on the highway and wondering if anyone would notice if he disappeared. 14 when the last shelter kicked him out. 16 when he stopped remembering the sound of someone saying his name kindly. 18, standing behind Kate's diner at 2 a.m., rummaging through a garbage bag for something that wasn't completely ruined. He'd heard the back door creak open and froze, a sandwich crust still in his hand. Light spilled out, and there she was, Kate, in an oversized t-shirt and jeans, tattoos faded and beautiful on her forearms. She should have screamed, or cursed, or called the cops. Instead, she tilted her head and said, "You hungry, kid?" He hadn't answered. Shame had glued his jaw shut. But she didn't need an answer. 10 minutes later, he was sitting in a corner booth, dripping on the vinyl seat while she slid a plate in front of him, eggs, toast, bacon, and a mug of coffee that warmed his hands so much he almost cried from just touching it. "Eat," she'd said gently. "You can explain later. Or not. Your choice." That night, kindness felt scarier than the streets. Now, standing on the porch, drenched in rain instead of grease from diner trash, Eli remembered the way she'd looked across the table when he finally told her his name. Like it mattered. Like he mattered. The leader's voice yanked him back to the present. "Last chance," the man called out. "Move. You don't know who you're protecting." Eli swallowed, throat raw. "I know enough," he said, voice hoarse but steady. "You're not touching her." Behind him, Kate flinched. "Eli, stop," she pleaded. "These men, they're from Razor's past. You don't have to do this." Razor. The name hung in the rain between them. Kate had told him about Razor on quiet nights, when the diner closed and the coffee pots were empty and the sky outside was full of stars instead of storm clouds. Her husband, locked up for a crime that wasn't entirely his and wasn't entirely not. A biker. A Hell's Angel. A man who'd taken a bullet for a brother and traded his freedom for someone else's heartbeat. The kind of man the world called criminal, but Kate still called love. Razor made enemies, she'd said once, staring at the window instead of Eli. Some people don't forgive. Some don't forget. But he's my family. And you, if you want it, you have family here too. He hadn't answered then, too afraid to believe it. But the words lodged in his chest like a seed. Now those enemies stood in the yard, guns ready, convinced Kate was alone. The rain came harder, pounding on the roof in a deafening drumbeat. Eli's shirt clung to his skin, cold and heavy. Fear raced through his veins, screaming for him to move, to run, to vanish into the night like he always had before. That survival voice had kept him alive for years. But it had also kept him alone. He thought of the first night in the spare room, lying under clean blankets, staring at the ceiling while Kate left the hallway light on. "In case you wake up scared," she'd said. No one had ever planned for his fear before. No one had made space for it. For the first time in his life, he wanted to stand for something instead of running from everything. He lifted the crowbar, raising it between himself and the men below. He wasn't big. He wasn't trained. He was just one skinny, homeless boy with more scars on the inside than out. But in that moment, with Kate crying behind him, he felt taller than the storm. "Kid," the leader said again, and this time there was an edge in his tone, the patience thinning. "I'm not asking anymore." The flash came before the sound. The first shot tore through the porch post inches from Eli's arm, exploding wood into his face. He flinched as splinters bit into his skin, the world jerking sideways for a second. Kate screamed his name, the sound raw and jagged, swallowed by thunder. Then the second shot hit. It felt like someone had rammed a white-hot iron through his shoulder. The pain was so bright, so sudden, that for a moment he didn't understand he'd been shot. His knees buckled, but he didn't fall. He tightened his grip on the crowbar until his knuckles burned and forced himself upright, breath coming in short, broken gasps. Another shot. Another burst of pain, lower this time, searing down his side. The night blurred at the edges, light smearing, the storm turning into a muffled roar. But still, somehow, his feet stayed planted on the porch. One step back would mean she was exposed. He couldn't let that happen. Through the haze, he heard Kate sob. "Eli, you're bleeding, please. Please just come inside." He turned his head slightly, just enough to see her out of the corner of his eye. Her hands were pressed over her mouth, eyes wide with horror, tears mixing with the rain. He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Lock the door," he rasped. "No matter what happens. Lock the door." For a heartbeat, the world went strangely quiet. The men in the yard hesitated, guns still raised. The storm seemed to hold its breath. Eli's vision pulsed with each heartbeat, the pain in his body like distant thunder. Then he felt it. A vibration, faint at first, humming up through the wet boards under his bare feet. The water in the puddles on the driveway began to tremble, rippling like something heavy was moving beneath the earth. The wind carried a low, rolling growl that didn't belong to the sky. The leader frowned, glancing over his shoulder into the darkness beyond the yard. "You hear that?" one of the men muttered. The sound grew louder, rhythmic, mechanical, angry. A chorus of engines, deep and rough, rising under the storm like some metal beast waking up. Far down the highway, distant points of light appeared through the curtains of rain. 1. Then 5. Then a line. Eli blinked hard, trying to clear the blood and water from his eyes as the lights multiplied, swelling into a river of white and yellow bearing down on the lonely stretch of road. The armed men shifted nervously, their confidence cracking for the first time. And as the roar of engines rolled closer, drowning out the thunder, Eli realized this night was about to become something no one on that porch would ever forget. From the porch, Eli watched the highway turn into a river of headlights, every beam slicing through the rain as roaring silhouettes surged closer. The sound hit first, a rolling wall of fury that vibrated through his bones and rattled the thin windows of the little blue house. The armed men in the yard spun toward the road, guns lowering just a fraction as confusion flashed across their faces. The storm that had owned the night was suddenly drowned out by something louder, heavier, and far more dangerous. Kate's hand clamped over her mouth. "No," she whispered, though even she could barely hear her own voice over the engines. It wasn't fear in her eyes now. It was something like hope, tangled up with dread. If stories like this grip you, hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next twist, because the way this night turns is something most people only see in movies. The first bikes appeared out of the curtain of rain, chrome glinting like lightning trapped in metal. Then more. And more. They came in tight formation, twin beams cutting through the darkness, tires hissing against the wet asphalt. Within seconds, the empty stretch of road was clogged with motorcycles, filling the lane, then the shoulder, then spilling off into the muddy edges of Kate's yard. The armed leader took a slow step back toward his SUV, his cocky smirk gone. "What is this?" he muttered, water streaking down his face. One of his men swallowed hard. "Boss, those patches." The bikes began to fan out, encircling the front of the property in a wide arc of rumbling engines and glaring headlights. Leather vests flashed in the harsh beams, and on every back the same insignia glowed through the rain, a grim skull with wings, arched by the words that made grown men think twice, Hell's Angels. Eli swayed, his vision blurring at the edges. Blood soaked warm and sticky through his shirt, turning cold as the rain pounded it. He could barely feel his feet anymore, but he kept them rooted to the porch. The crowbar dragged low at his side now rather than raised, yet his body still formed a barrier between Kate and the chaos beyond. The bikes cut their engines one by one, the roar fading into a heavy, charged silence broken only by the hiss of rain and the ticking of hot metal cooling in the night air. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Hundreds of helmeted heads turned toward the house. Toward the boy on the porch. Toward the 6 men with guns. And then, one rider dismounted. He swung a leg off his Harley with the slow heaviness of someone who'd carried too much for too long. His boots hit the mud with a dull thud. Even from the porch, even through the blur in his eyes, Eli knew who it had to be before he saw the face. Razor. He was taller than Eli imagined, broad shoulders stretching the soaked leather of his cut, gray threaded through the dark beard that framed his jaw. His eyes, though, those were sharp. Old pain, old loyalty, and something dangerously calm burned in them as he walked through the sea of bikes, the other riders parting to let him pass. Kate's knees buckled. She caught herself on the doorframe with a strangled sound that was half sob, half prayer. "Razor," she breathed. Eli blinked hard, his head spinning. That name. The man. The stories he'd heard whispered over late-night coffee suddenly had weight and breath and footsteps. Razor didn't look at Kate first. He looked at Eli. His gaze passed over the crowbar, the bare feet, the pale, shaking body streaked with blood and rain. For a long, suffocating moment, he didn't say anything. Lightning flashed behind him, turning his silhouette into something almost mythic. A storm-soaked angel of vengeance surrounded by an army of steel and leather. Then Razor shifted his attention to the men in the yard. "You came to my house," he said, voice low but carrying easily over the rain. There was no need to shout. Every syllable cut through the air like a blade. "You pointed guns at my old lady. And you shot a kid on my porch." The leader straightened, forcing his shoulders back. His fingers flexed around his pistol, but he didn't raise it. "Razor," he said with a shaky laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't know you were out. This is business. Nothing personal. Your debts." Razor took another step forward, and the men with him seemed to move without moving. The entire ring of bikers shifted subtly, tightening their circle around the yard. The leader's words trailed off as he realized just how many eyes were on him, cold, silent, waiting. "You made it personal," Razor said. Rain streamed down his face, dripping from his beard, but he didn't flinch. "You made it personal when you aimed at her." His head tilted slightly toward Kate without looking back. "And when you put bullets in the boy who stood where I wasn't." Eli's vision stuttered. The night tilted. Where I wasn't. The words landed heavier than the storm. He swallowed against the metallic taste in his mouth, trying to steady his breathing. One of the gunmen shifted, nerves getting the better of him. "We should go," he hissed to his leader. "This is—" "Shut up," the leader snapped, but his voice had lost its certainty. He forced a smile, glancing around at the sea of bikers. "Look, nobody needs to get hurt. We walk away, you walk away. We'll settle this another." A biker to Razor's left stepped forward, his vest heavy with patches. "You already hurt someone," he growled. "That option's gone." For a second, the storm seemed to press down on them, squeezing the night tighter. Eli's legs trembled. The porch swam. He felt the crowbar slipping from his hand but refused to let it fall. Not yet. Not in front of them. Kate stepped out from the doorway, one hand still on the frame, the other reaching for Eli's arm. "He needs a hospital," she said, her voice breaking, directed at no one and everyone. "Please. He's just a kid." Razor's gaze flicked to her. For the first time, his expression softened, just a fraction. A history only they knew passed between them in that glance, years of love, pain, separation, and waiting. Then he looked back at Eli, and something like respect had joined the anger. "You stood for her," Razor said quietly, as if stating the weather. "Alone." Eli's throat worked. Words felt like rocks. "Couldn't let them take her," he managed, the sentence shredded by pain and cold. She gave me a home." Something shifted in the crowd of bikers. Heads nodded. A few jaws clenched. One woman wiped rain from her cheeks that might not have been just rain. The leader scoffed, trying to reclaim the moment. "You're all insane. Over a diner waitress and some stray kid? Razor, your boss isn't going to like this." Razor's eyes hardened to steel. "My family comes before any boss," he said. "Kate is my wife. This boy bled for her when I wasn't here. That makes him ours." He raised his chin slightly. A signal. Every engine around the yard revved at once, a sudden unified roar that shook the ground. The armed men flinched, stumbling back a few steps as the sound swallowed their courage. The leader's hand finally jerked up, raising his pistol not in aim but in reflex. Fingers tightened. Fear made bad decisions feel like survival. If your heart is pounding imagining that yard full of engines and guns, this is the perfect moment to hit like and subscribe. Because what's about to happen next will decide who walks away from this night. "Last chance," Razor said, his voice somehow clear through the growl of engines. "Get in your trucks. Leave. You don't come near her again. You don't send anyone. You don't whisper her name. Or any house you sleep in becomes a graveyard." The men hesitated, looking from Razor to the endless ring of riders. There was no doubt in the air. No bluff. These were people who had ridden through storms and blood and bad decisions for decades. People who had nothing left to prove and nothing left to fear. The leader swallowed hard. His gun wavered, then lowered an inch. And then his pride stabbed where logic couldn't reach. "You think you scare us?" he spat, jaw clenching. "You're just hiding behind your army. Without them, you're just another ex-con with a patched vest." Razor's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You really want to test that? He asked softly. Eli's knees buckled. The world lurched sideways as the porch boards rushed up to meet him. The crowbar finally slipped from his grasp, clattering against the wood. Kate screamed, dropping down beside him, her hands frantically pressing against the wound's leaking warmth into the cold rain. Stay with me, Eli. Stay with me. Look at me. Look at me. Her face blurred in and out of focus, framed by the chaotic halo of headlights and rain. Somewhere beyond her shoulder, engines still growled, voices still shouted, but the sounds were starting to stretch, to warp, to pull away like they belonged to another world. A rough, calloused hand suddenly replaced one of Kate's on his shoulder, applying steady pressure that made stars explode behind his eyes. A shadow leaned over him. Razor's face came into view, closer now, real in a way legends aren't supposed to be. Listen to me, kid, Razor said, his tone firm, urgent. You don't die on this porch. Not after what you did. You hear me? Eli tried to nod, but his head barely twitched. Didn't plan to, he mumbled, a weak attempt at a joke that came out slurred. The darkness around the edges of his vision thickened, pushing inward. The engines surged again, louder, angrier. A shout went up from the yard. One biker roared, they're aiming. Another voice, boss. Razor's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. In that instant, Eli saw the shift. The man turning from wounded husband and grateful stranger back into the thing the armed men should have feared from the start. Kate, Razor barked without looking down. Get him inside. Now. She nodded, tears spilling over, but her feet felt glued to the boards. The yard had erupted into movement, bikers stepping forward, guns appearing from nowhere, the ring tightening like a noose of leather and steel. The leader of the intruders raised his pistol with shaking hands, defiance burning through his terror. The other 5 followed, muzzles lifting toward the porch, toward Kate, toward Razor, toward the small house that had somehow become the center of the universe. Rain hammered harder. Engines screamed louder. Eli's eyes rolled back, the world dimming to a tunnel of light and shadow. And as the first finger began to tighten on a trigger, the night exploded in a way that would change all of their lives forever. Engines and gunfire collided in the same breath. The first shot didn't come from the yard. It came from the ring of bikes, sharp, cracking through the storm like a lightning strike that had finally found something to hit. One of Razor's riders had seen the guns lift toward the porch and reacted before thought could catch up. In an instant, the invisible line between threat and war vanished. The yard erupted. Shouts, muzzle flashes, the thunder of boots slamming into mud. Bikers surged forward like the storm itself had grown teeth. The intruders fired wild, panicked shots into the chaos, the flashes of their guns strobing across leather vests and rain-slicked faces. Kate dropped over Eli's body, pressing herself against him as splinters and mud exploded around the porch. If you want to see how deep this story goes, like and subscribe before the next blow lands, because from here on, every second on that porch could be someone's last. Razor didn't duck. He moved, fast and low, like a man who'd spent a lifetime in rooms where bullets decided arguments. His hand clamped around Kate's shoulder, the other hooking under Eli's arm. On 3, he growled near her ear. 1, 2, now. He yanked Eli's limp weight toward the door as Kate stumbled backward, dragging with everything she had. Eli's feet scraped across the drenched boards, leaving streaks of red that the rain couldn't wash away fast enough. Another shot cracked, splintering the doorframe inches from Kate's face. Behind them, the yard had turned into a knot of bodies and fury. Bikers slammed into the gunmen, tackling, swinging chains and fists. Engines revved as some riders kept their bikes between the porch and stray bullets, using steel and chrome as moving shields. "Get him inside," someone roared from the yard. Kate braced her shoulder under Eli's, teeth gritted, as Razor shoved the door the rest of the way open with his boot. "Go," he barked. "I'll finish this." Kate hesitated, eyes wide and wild. "Razor." He cut her off with a look, jaw clenched. "I'm not leaving you alone again," he said. "Not tonight. Get him in. I'll be right behind you." There was no time to argue. She pulled Eli inside, his blood smearing across the tile as she dragged him into the dim, cramped living room. Rain hammered the roof, muffling the chaos outside into a distant, violent hum. Her hands shook as she lowered him onto the old couch, its faded fabric instantly blooming dark beneath him. "Eli, stay with me," she whispered, patting his cheek lightly. His eyes fluttered, unfocused, lips pale. "Come on, kid. Look at me." For a heartbeat, they did. His gaze locked on hers, glassy but stubbornly alive. "Cold," he muttered, voice barely there. "I know," she said, choking back a sob. "I know. Just hold on." She tore open the drawer under the coffee table with frantic hands, grabbing the rolled-up first aid kit she'd kept there for years, mostly for nicks and burns from the diner, not bullets. The bandages looked insultingly small. Outside, a biker screamed something wordless and furious. A gunshot answered. Kate flinched but forced her focus down, peeling Eli's shirt back from the wound at his shoulder. Blood welled up, hot and slick between her fingers. "Pressure," she whispered to herself. "You've got to hold pressure." She pressed both hands down over the wound, and Eli arched with a weak groan. "Sorry, sorry," she gasped, tears mixing with the rainwater on her face. "I know it hurts. I know." The front door burst open again, wind and noise shoving their way inside. Kate's head snapped up, heart lurching, then settled when she saw Razor filling the frame, soaked and breathing hard but still standing. Two other bikers were with him, both bleeding from cuts and grazes, eyes sharp and scanning the room. One kicked the door shut behind them, the sound like a gunshot in the cramped space. "They're pulling back," Razor said, chest heaving. "For now. For now." Kate echoed, voice thin with fear. Razor's jaw worked. "They didn't expect us. They sure as hell didn't expect this many of us. But men like that? They don't swallow a humiliation easy." His gaze dropped to Eli on the couch, taking in the bandages, the pallor. "How bad?" "He needs a hospital," Kate said immediately. "He's burning up already." "Razor, we can't just. You take him into town in that SUV still out front," one of the bikers cut in, jerking his head toward the window, "and you're driving through a shooting gallery. Those guys aren't sprinting to confession. They're regrouping." Razor scrubbed a hand over his face, rain dripping from his beard onto the floor. The thunder outside had softened, but the tension inside the tiny house had only thickened. Boss, the second biker said quietly, some of the boys are saying we should move them. Take Kate and the kid to a safe house. Club property. Somewhere we can lock it down. Kate snapped her head toward him. I'm not running, she said, fiercer than she felt. This is my home. Razor's eyes met hers. In them was a whole history of running and fighting and losing and choosing where to make a final stand. Sometimes staying is the bravest thing you can do, he said. Sometimes leaving is. He stepped closer to Eli, who watched him through slitted eyes, breaths shallow and quick. Razor crouched, his big frame seeming to fill the whole room. You did something no one asked you to do tonight, Razor said, voice quieter now. You owed her nothing. You owed me less. But you stood anyway. Didn't feel like I owed, Eli mumbled. Felt like. I wanted to. Kate's hand tightened on his. Razor gave a short, almost disbelieving huff of a laugh. Yeah. That's worse, he said softly. Debt you can pay back. Love. That's expensive. The biker by the window shifted the curtain with 2 fingers, peering out. We've got scouts watching the road, he said. But we can't sit in the open like this all night. If they bring more men. They will, Razor interrupted. They've got too much ego to let this go. He looked between Eli and Kate. If they can't hit me, they'll hit what they think is easier. You mean us, Kate said. I mean you, he confirmed. You, and him. Silence fell, broken only by Eli's ragged breathing and the drum of the storm. The house seemed to grow smaller with every second. Then we move, Kate said suddenly. The word surprised even her. If staying here puts him in more danger, we go. I don't care where. I don't care how ugly it is. I'm not watching some gang finish what they started while we sit here waiting. Razor studied her for a long beat, then nodded once. All right, he said. We move. The biker by the door frowned. Tonight? Right now, Razor replied. Before they get their nerve back. What about the kid? The other asked. He might not survive a bumpy ride. Razor's eyes hardened. He won't survive staying still either. Kate looked down at Eli, her pulse racing so hard she thought she might pass out. Can you hear me? She asked. We're going to move you, okay? It's going to hurt. A lot. But you've survived worse than pain, haven't you? He swallowed, eyes unfocused but still catching pieces of her face. Where? He whispered. Razor stood, the floorboards creaking under his weight. A clubhouse, he said. Ours. Not pretty. Not quiet. But it's a place where if anyone comes looking for you, they don't ask questions twice. One of the bikers gave a grim smile. They're going to regret ever learning this address. As Razor started barking low orders, who would ride point, who would stay behind, who would escort Kate, Kate bent over Eli and pressed her forehead to his. You're not alone anymore, she whispered. So don't you dare slip away on me now. He let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh, might have been a sob. Outside, engines began to turn over again, one by one, idling low and impatient like caged animals. If your chest is tight picturing that tiny house about to empty into a storm of engines and danger, this is the moment to like and subscribe so you don't miss what waits for them on that road. Razor came back to Eli's side with a torn-up denim jacket and a length of cloth in his hands. "We're going to lift you," he said. "Try to stay with us. If you pass out, that's fine. Just, don't stop fighting in here." He tapped his own chest. Kate slid her arms under Eli's shoulders. Razor took his legs, careful but firm. Eli gasped as white-hot pain tore through him, vision exploding into fireworks of red and black. "On 3, Razor said again. 1, 2. The door swung open on a blast of cold air and engine noise. Headlights flooded the living room in harsh, blinding light, throwing their shadows long against the walls. 3. They lifted him. Pain roared up, drowning thought, ripping a hoarse cry from Eli's throat as the world tilted and lurched. The ceiling swung over him, then the doorway, then the storm itself, wet and furious and full of waiting steel. In the yard, engines revved. Bikers turned their heads toward the tree line, toward the road, toward the darkness beyond the reach of their lights. And just as Razor and Kate stepped out onto the porch with Eli between them, a pair of unfamiliar headlights snapped on from the far edge of the property, aimed straight at the house, too low, too quiet, too late to have come from any of Razor's men. The unfamiliar headlights froze everyone in place. For a heartbeat, the yard was nothing but white glare, engine growls, and the harsh drum of the storm. Razor's grip tightened on Eli's legs. Kate's fingers dug into his shoulders. The bikers closest to the edge of the property shifted, bodies angling toward the new threat, hands drifting toward holsters and chains. The light sat there, glaring straight at the porch, too bright and too still, like an eye deciding whether to blink or strike. Then the engine cut. The headlights died, plunging that side of the property into shadow. For one suffocating second, nobody moved. The rain filled the silence again, hissing off chrome, dripping from cut edges of leather and denim. Somewhere in the dark, a car door opened with a slow, echoing creak. If stories like this have you hooked already, like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because this final turn is what all that blood and thunder has been building toward. A figure stepped into the beam of the nearest bike's headlight. He lifted both hands to shoulder height, empty palms facing the sea of guns pointed his way. "Easy," he shouted, voice hoarse and strained. "Don't shoot." The bikers didn't lower their weapons. Engines revved, a low warning. Razor squinted through the rain. "Step closer," he called back, his voice flat. "Slow." The man did as he was told, boots sinking into mud with each careful step. He was younger than Razor, older than Eli, his face drawn tight with fear and something else, shame, maybe. A soaked button-up shirt clung to his frame, dark hair plastered to his forehead. No patches. No colors. Just a cheap jacket and eyes that couldn't stay still. I'm with them," he said, jerking his chin toward the direction the intruders had fled. "Or I was. I drove one of the backup trucks. They left me when they saw all of you." Every gun tightened on him. "Wrong place to admit that, kid," one biker growled. The man swallowed. "They'll be back," he blurted. "Not tonight. But they're not going to let this go. Not after being run off like that. My boss, he doesn't lose. He'll wait, reload, and hit you when you don't expect it." Maybe the woman. Maybe the boy. Maybe your clubhouses. He doesn't care. Razor's eyes stayed cold. Why tell us? Because I didn't sign up for this, the man said, voice cracking. Debts, sure. Muscle, maybe. But this? Shooting kids. Terrorizing someone's wife. That's not what they told me. His gaze flicked toward Eli, slung between Razor and Kate like a broken bridge. I'm not walking back into that. If I can buy myself some mercy by warning you, I'm taking it. The rain seemed to ease, just a fraction. The storm watching instead of attacking. Razor studied the man for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Get in your car, he said. You drive out of here. You don't look back. You tell your boss nothing useful. You tell him you saw more of us than you could count. And you tell him that if he comes again, he'd better bring an army big enough to bury the sun. The man stared, wide-eyed. You're letting me go. Razor's jaw flexed. You came here with men who shot a kid on my porch, he said. That's not something I forget. But tonight, I've got more important things to protect than a grudge. So, yeah. I'm letting you go. His voice dropped, dangerous. Once. The man nodded furiously. You won't see me again, he said. He backed away, hands still raised until he reached his car. The engine coughed to life, wheels spinning in the mud before it tore away down the flooded road, taillights shrinking to pinpricks in the dark. A biker near the front spat into the mud. Should have let us handle him, he muttered. Razor shook his head. We're not cleaning the whole world tonight, he said. Just ours. He looked at Kate. We're out of time. We move now. They carried Eli down the steps, boots thudding against the wet wood. The air outside felt sharper, colder, every raindrop a needle against his burning skin. Eli drifted in and out of the world, sometimes catching snatches of sound, engines, voices, Kate's ragged breathing, and sometimes falling into a thick, muffled nowhere. They reached a black van parked in the middle of the pack, its back doors already open. Inside, blankets covered the floor, gear pushed aside to clear a makeshift space. Two bikers climbed in first, reaching out to help pull Eli's weight gently onto the padded surface. Kate scrambled in after him, refusing to let go of his hand. Razor leaned in, filling the doorway with his presence. You ride in here with him, he told her. I'll be right in front of you. No one touches this van. She nodded, fingers still locked around Eli's. If he stops breathing. He won't, Razor said. He's too damn stubborn. He slapped the side of the van twice. The doors shut, plunging the interior into dim, cramped shadows broken only by thin slivers of light from the windows. The smell of oil, leather, and damp blankets wrapped around them. Outside, engines revved in a rising chorus. The ground trembled. Eli felt the rumble of it through the metal beneath him, a low, growling heartbeat bigger than his own. The convoy rolled out. Rain streaked sideways across the windows as they pulled onto the highway, bikes flanking the van in a tight formation. Headlights carved twin tunnels through the storm, the road ahead an endless stretch of wet black ribbon and approaching consequence. Eli drifted, every bump sending shards of pain through his body, every turn a distant wave he could barely ride. Kate never let go. She kept one hand on his chest, feeling the rise and fall, counting breaths like prayers. With her other hand, she wiped rain and tears from her face and pressed her forehead to the cool metal beside him. "If you walk away from this story with anything," she whispered, more to herself than him, "let it be this: you were never disposable. Not to me. Not to them. Not anymore." The van slowed as they reached the outskirts of a forgotten industrial strip, a place of rusted fences, cracked pavement, and warehouses with more broken windows than whole ones. One building stood out only because the bikes turned toward it like they'd done it 100 times. A faded sign hung crooked over the entrance, unreadable in the rain. The side door rolled up on its mechanism, opening into a wide, dim interior washed in yellow light. The van rolled inside and stopped. The door rumbled shut behind them, shutting out the storm like someone hanging up on a nightmare. Hands were there before Kate could reach for the handle. Bikers opened the doors, faces lined with worry, respect, curiosity. Razor appeared again, soaked and solid. "We've got a medic," he said. "Old Army. Not a hospital, but better than nothing out there tonight." A lean woman with silver-streaked hair and steady eyes stepped forward, medical bag already swinging at her side. "Let me through," she ordered. No one argued. They lifted Eli again, this time onto a table near the back where a stained sheet had been spread. The woman peeled back the makeshift bandages Kate had wrapped, assessing the wounds with quick, practiced movements. "He's lucky," she murmured. "Or stubborn. Or both. None of these are clean, but nothing's hit the wrong organ yet. We stop the bleeding, keep him warm, keep infection from chewing him up, and he's got a shot." The room exhaled a breath it didn't realize it had been holding. Razor stepped back, shoulders finally dropping a fraction. Around him, men and women who had ridden through the worst of the storm now stood quiet, watching a skinny homeless boy fight his way back from the edge. "If you've ridden this entire road with them tonight," a gravel-voiced biker muttered to another, "hit like and subscribe to whatever fate put you here, because this is the kind of loyalty people don't believe until they see it." Kate hovered near Eli's head, brushing damp hair from his forehead, listening to the medic's instructions like scripture. "You stay with me," she whispered again and again, a mantra now. "You stay." Hours blurred. Outside, the storm finally began to ease, thunder rolling farther and farther away. Inside, the club worked in shifts, some standing watch by the doors, some making coffee, some patching bruises and cuts of their own. But everyone, at some point, found themselves glancing toward the back table where Eli lay. Morning crept through the high windows as a pale, apologetic light. The medic wiped her brow with the back of her wrist and stepped away at last. "He's sleeping now," she said. "On his own. Body's choosing to repair instead of quit. That's a good sign." Kate sagged into a chair, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you." Razor approached the table, looking down at the boy who had once been just a stranger in Kate's stories. He reached out and rested a rough hand gently against Eli's shoulder, careful to avoid the bandages. "You earned more than a meal tonight, kid," he said softly. "You earned a patch." Kate looked up, eyes swollen but shining. "Razor." He met her gaze. "Not today," he said. "Not tomorrow. Prospecting takes time. Work. Screwing up and fixing it. But as far as I'm concerned, he already showed me the one thing a brother has to have. Heart, Kate whispered. Razor nodded. More than men twice his size. Outside, the last of the rain slid from the gutters in tired streams. Inside, someone turned down the music that had been playing low in the background. The warehouse felt less like a hideout now and more like what it truly was, a home for broken people who had chosen each other anyway. Eli stirred. His eyes cracked open, blinking against the blurry light. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar. The smell, oil, smoke, coffee, leather, wasn't the diner, or the tiny house, or the cold reek of alleys. It was new. Heavy. Safe. He turned his head, wincing at the pull in his shoulder. Kate was there, her hand already finding his. Hey, she whispered, a tearful smile tugging at her mouth. You scared the hell out of us. He swallowed, throat dry. Did we make it? Razor stepped into his field of view, that improbable mix of menace and warmth in his eyes. You did more than make it, he said. He held something up, black leather, gleaming in the thin light. A vest. On the front, a small blank spot where a name would go. On the back, the familiar skull with wings. This is a prospect cut, Razor said. It doesn't mean you're in. It means you're invited to try. You wear it, you're saying you want to earn a place with us. No guarantees. No shortcuts. Just miles and work and showing up when it counts. Eli stared at it, breath hitching. The weight of it, of what it represented, seemed to press the air out of his lungs. Why? He asked, voice cracking. Why me? Razor glanced at Kate, then back at him. Because when the night came with guns and fear, he said, you stood in front of it with nothing but a piece of scrap metal and a promise to protect someone you love. That's the kind of man this family is built on. Kate squeezed Eli's hand. You were lost when I found you, she said softly. But you didn't stay lost. You chose us. Now, we're choosing you. Razor laid the vest gently across Eli's chest. It felt heavy and right all at once. You don't have to decide today, Razor said. You can walk away when you're healed. No one will chase you. But if you stay, if you put this on, you're not just some homeless kid anymore. You're ours. And we're yours. For as long as you ride with us. Eli looked from the vest to Kate, to the shadows of the bikers hovering at the edges of the room, pretending not to watch while watching everything. People who had ridden through a storm for a woman they refused to lose. People who had made his pain their business without asking what it might cost. His fingers curled, weak but determined, over the leather. I don't want to walk away, he whispered. Not this time. Kate's tears spilled over. Razor's jaw flexed as he fought down the emotion in his eyes. Then welcome home, Eli, Razor said, voice low and steady. Welcome to the family. Outside, the clouds finally broke, letting a sliver of sunlight fall through the high windows, cutting across the room and landing right where Eli lay, with Kate's hand in his and the weight of a new life resting on his chest.